the brilliant, thank you. So welcome everybody, a warm welcome to all of you from all over the UK, some familiar faces and some new faces. People will still be coming in as I speak, but I'm going to kick off anyway. So my name's Maddie and I coordinate the Urban Agriculture Consortium along with Jeremy Isles. And we're all here today to explore this thing called urban agriculture and the work of this particular project, the Urban Agriculture Consortium, at the end of our second year. And I feel it's important to open this session by saying that we are meeting today at a pivotal and unprecedented moment in history, really. As we go through this session today, we are bearing this context in mind. The familiar structures of our food system and economic system are broadly, our economic system more broadly, are crumbling, and our chances of acting to mitigate that are severely compromised by a number of different things, by political ideology, by cultural narratives, by embedded structures that disempower. And we're all feeling this in different ways, both personally and in our work. The creation of a food system that heals and nourishes all people and all other species relies entirely on people coming together in creative endeavour and letting go of the constraints, structures and fears that prevent change from happening at pace. So this today is an open space to listen and learn and exchange, and I invite you to take from it whatever is most helpful to you and to give whatever you feel moved to. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen, and we'll go to can you say if you can see that, because I can't see you?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so there'll be a lot of information that we're sharing today. It's really an important moment for us as a project to reflect on where we've been and where we're going. And this is a kind of a sort of snapshot of the present moment in the life of this project. So we will be broadly holding this next couple of hours in 3 parts. The first part will be focusing on us, the Urban Agriculture Consortium, what we are, what we're doing, and also the evaluations that we've just done at the end of our second year. And we'll have contributions from a couple of members of our core oversight group and Hilary, who has done our governance review. The second bit will be reflecting on what we're seeing emerge in our work, and we'll have contributions from partners who are working on the ground. And in part 3, we want to reflect a bit more on the way forward and to invite all of you to bring your thoughts into that, into what we as a project focus on in the coming year or so, and reflections on the kind of what's at the centre of our solar system, if you like, what's the sun around which we are all oscillating. So I will see if this slide will change, and I will pass over to Jeremy to introduce a bit more the Urban Agriculture Consortium.
Yeah, great, thanks. Welcome everyone, old friends and new. I can see a lot of people in the participants list who I'm familiar with and worked with over many years, and some very new people who I haven't met ever before. So welcome to you all. Just quickly, because we've got a lot to get through in the time, the Urban Agriculture Consortium came together really in the late 2019, early 2020, just before lockdown. And we've done everything, quite literally everything, virtually since, apart from one site visit to the Kindling Trust in Stockport last year. And so despite the constraints of working remotely, it's actually proved to be remarkably efficient and effective. So these people are the people who are actively involved in these organisations, actively involved with the Urban Agriculture Consortium. So we've got some national partners, as you can see, but also some very localised ones, such as Chef Food and the Nottingham Good Food Partnership, Middlesbrough Food Partnership. And we're obviously grateful, very grateful to Esme Fairbairn, who fund the majority of the work, Poldham Puckham, and also Necessity for their support as well. And we'll come back to that later on. So really the Urban Agriculture Consortium was set up to amplify and accelerate change towards localised agroecology, agroecological food systems. And that's what we think we're achieving. So we'll move on to the next slide, Maddie, could you?
Yeah.
Which is your project diagram. So Maddie's going to talk a bit about how the project evolved from 2020 through till this year.
Thank you. So it really helps us to sort of see, and I have an overview of the project in sort of diagrammatic form. So this is a diagram of what the UAC project is working on currently. There should be, let me see if this is going to work. So if I'm zooming into the middle of that diagram, you'll see this is just what was at the center. So what this means is that in the middle, we've got the people, our pathfinders, who are our partners, place-based partners on the ground, our COG, which is our core oversight group, made up of representatives of a number of organisations, a few of which are here, which is great. And they help support and advise and guide the project. And GFA is Green Future Associates. So that's the accountable body, if you like, for the Urban Agriculture Consortium. And then the circles around are the projects that we have evolved, that we've created and that we've developed over the last couple of years. And this has sort of refined itself as we've gone on, as we've really sort of looked deeper into our purpose and what's working and what people want to do, and how the things that we need to deepen with our partners on the ground. So I'm just going to say very briefly a bit about these project areas so that you get a sense of what we're currently working on. And a lot of these things are things that we've developed over the last 2 years, and we feel over the coming time that UAC exists, these are the things that we'd really like to continue to focus on and deepen our work on with our place-based partners and our other sort of guiding partners as well. So starting from the sort of top, slightly to the left, PING stands for the Policy Influencer Network Group. And this is a kind of open space for anyone who's involved in policy influencing around urban agriculture to come together to explore different themes. So we've had themes around COP, so food and climate, just after COP26. We've had a theme about how soil health and human health are so deeply connected. Our last one was about the land use planning system and urban food security. And so we bring sort of practitioners in the field into that space, and with people from local authorities to kind of cross-fertilise. Going round to the right, we are funding a brilliant colleague, Simon Ruston, to work with each of our pathfinders and give them bespoke planning advice around how to bridge the work of a food partnership into the local planning process. We've created a mapping community, so those who are experts really in open source data mapping and applying that to how we map food growing land and potential food growing land in urban and peri-urban spaces. And that's now a community of practice, which has got an online kind of platform. That's a really, really exciting space. And they've done some very interesting and sort of impactful work in different kinds of urban spaces. For example, the peri-urban and urban spaces around Lancaster, to infill sites in Lambeth, and using neglected sites in Newcastle and many others. We're doing a sort of look at bringing a little team together around looking at activating the West of England Combined Authority to take a sort of city region scale food system seriously and direct investment and planning decisions towards that. We've been working with a cluster of places in the north for the last couple of years, and we're now just initiating the same in the Midlands. And it's lovely to see a few of you here, Midlands folk. So that's really great. Working as a regional cluster is something that has been very powerful, and which is why we're replicating it again in the Midlands. We collaborated with our northern partners, our northern city partners, to seed Farmstarts. And that was a collaboration that we were able to use our funding to bring the Land Workers Alliance in. They run the National Farmstart network, so they were natural partners. We were able to bring a cluster of 5 cities together at once to seed Farmstarts and develop Farmstarts across these cities, and they worked on that together in a feasibility, and that's something that we really want to continue. We've opened a conversation between Bristol City Council and Bristol Community Land Trust about a part the council can work, so whereby the land trust could manage council-owned land as a portfolio of sites, thereby unburdening the council, unburdening growers, and matching land to growers in a more coordinated and a quicker way. So that's a very early days, very exciting piece. And then the smaller pink ones are emergent pieces that sort of amplify other bits of work that we're doing, and those are coming through our COG partner organisations. So Growing Real Food for Nutrition, we're honing in on a piece to support the development of Farmstarts and their work around growing nutrient dense food. And we're also looking at an offering with the Permaculture Association to support the Farmstarts with their enterprise development and the whole farm system, whole business system, and also looking with the Open Food Network more deeply into food hubs and how we can spread the food hubs model across all of our Pathfinder places. So that's a lot. It's absolutely brilliant work, and it's all come through what our Pathfinder places on the ground have told us they need and want to work on together as a collective and a community of practice, and then with the guidance of our COG and our other wider partners. So I'm trying to get to another slide. So we asked, as part of our evaluation, we asked our partners.
Being a part of the Urban Agriculture Consortium and being a Northern Path.
Sorry, let me just go back. We asked a couple of our partners on the ground to just give us a minute of what they thought about being a part of the Urban Agriculture Consortium. So I'm just going to play this for you. This is Fran Housel, who is a ninja of a partner working on the ground, coordinating a lot of urban agriculture stuff in Sheffield. Here's Fran.
Being a part of the Urban Agriculture Consortium and being a Northern Pathfinder has been a particularly useful experience, both in terms of helping me understand all the issues around urban agriculture and also to advance the narrative around it within the city of Sheffield. It's principally, there's three ways in which it's really helped. One is the network, the forum that's created through via all the northern cities that work together, which has allowed collaboration and help, answers to questions from people who have more experience, encouragement when things have felt quite difficult. But also it's been very useful to work with the people who have both designed and tested the mapping software, which is helping to hopefully unlock land around cities and in cities. And lastly, I would say the Farmstart programme has been especially useful because it's allowed me to really explore in depth what other places have already done and what might be useful to Sheffield in future.
Brilliant. And here we have Catherine, who from Middlesbrough, talking about, she's running the Farmstart programme there and working with our colleague Jo at Middlesbrough Environment City. So this is just a few words from Catherine.
Hiya, my name's Catherine. I run the Middlesbrough Farmstart programme and I'm on the Farmstart site at the moment, which is to the south of the town. We have about an acre. Just do a quick, don't know what you call that, panoramic type thing, I don't know. I just wanted to say a few words about what being involved with Farmstart means to me, to us as an organisation and to us as a cohort of trainees. It's been an ambition for a long time. It's what the town needs, more food produced, but people within the town producing that food. I've known that for a long time. Being involved with UAC and the Farmstart network it's just given me the impetus to get that going. I think knowing that our small scale of approaching it with challenging conditions is okay, that it's better to do something rather than nothing, that Farmstart looks different in different places in the country, different places in the world, and is still successful. So for me personally, it's a bit of an achievement of an ambition, really. And for us as an organisation, Barefoot Kitchen, again, we've known this is needed, and we've also known that our community really wants it. So being able to respond to that, to be able to increase the resilience of our community has been staggering, really. And as part of a cohort of trainees, gosh, it's we've got a group of about 6, 7, 8 people, all different backgrounds. We've got a few people who are kind of volunteering rather than starting enterprises. We've kept it really flexible. We've said everything's okay. Give it a whirl. We're starting quickly. We might make mistakes. We might need to change things. To watch those people developing confidence, to watch them form lasting friendships, to watch them put stuff in the ground and hopefully within the next month take that stuff out of the ground and sell it. God, that's priceless, really. I don't think that would have happened. I mean, we formed friendships. I don't think that would have happened without the Farmstart programme. I've seen people become friends. I've seen people become part of a network, seen people get confident and skilled and to grow in more ways than one. Yeah, that sounds cheesy as anything, but that's the kind of sentiment. It's just been fabulous, and I'm really enjoying the journey, and I'm really enjoying the future and what's to come. And I think I speak for the entire Middlesbrough 2022 Farmstart crew when I say that. Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. So thanks, Fran and Catherine. There's nothing quite like hearing it straight from directly from them. So I would like to invite next a couple of offerings from members of our core oversight group. We haven't prompted them to say anything in particular, other than just to say for a few minutes, just 3 minutes each, something like that, talk about your sense of UAC, what it's doing, where it's going from your perspective. Could I invite you to go first, Gary, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then go ahead.
Yeah, afternoon all. Likewise, good to see some familiar faces and a few people that I don't yet know and haven't worked with, but that will change, I'm sure, because that's part of what UAC has been really good at doing, actually, is networking people and actually giving them space to collaborate and sort of work together in the areas that they complement each other. So that's definitely one of the strengths I've taken out of it. But like any new partnership, you could argue that there's some existing partnerships within the UAC, but a new partnership takes a little while to find its feet, and this was no different. So it was interesting to sort of be in that initial journey as one of those sort of core partners. And I suppose I'm here representing a very small organisation, really. Officially, I'm here as a representative of Open Newtown, which is really geographically based, very small town in mid Wales, market town, 5,000 homes, 12,000 people. But we've taken on the largest land transfer in the whole of Wales. So we're managing 140 acres of land on behalf of our local authority and Welsh Government, and some of that through freehold and some of that through 99-year leasehold, so pretty much in perpetuity. But as a small organisation, we don't have a great reach, and the one thing that I've really benefited from the UAC is having that connectivity, not just with actually friends and colleagues in my own country, if like in Wales, but actually right across all corners of the UK. And with my other role, my social farms and gardens one, it's actually interesting to sort of occasionally see some of my social farms and gardens colleagues within the network as well, which is great because we don't always collaborate even internally in a single organisation. So very grateful for that. I think the strengths of the UAC that I've really seen is in order to find its feet, there wasn't really any set agenda, which was great, and that's really nice. Obviously, there were some clear ideas of what we might like to do, but I think through conversations, through talking to people, through getting out on the ground almost, ideas emerged. Those ideas were supported. Some didn't quite start off as well as others did, but I know we've talked about it and we've heard about it, but the Farmstart, those sort of pathfinder groups, see some real successes in that and opportunities for replication. The mapping one, equally, we're doing bits of mapping, but actually it was great to be able to muscle in on that group and understand what was going on, and actually we've pinched some of the systems and some of the skill sets from within that, but actually we've adapted our own as well that then can become shareable back. So that's really positive. How do I see it developing in the future was one of the questions, and I think again it's quite dynamic. I think obviously we're slightly funding led, and that depends on who your funders may be or may not be and what the flexibility is. But I think I couldn't answer that one. I think that will come down to the people that are involved in the network. People have their passions, their areas of skills and their expertise, and they will take us on a journey in the right directions, and some might end up in a sort of a blindish alley, but that's absolutely fine, whereas others will really flourish. I do think it's added value to a lot of the work we do in Wales, particularly around policy, and I know Jeremy likes the term, and Maddie, around amplification, and I think that's actually true. It certainly has delivered that. We do quite a lot of policy work in Wales, but it tends to sit in Wales, but actually when I come to a UAC core group meeting or a policy influence network group meeting or these wider ones, we get to talk about what we're doing in Wales and how it's replicated, how it's learning from, let's say, community rights and empowerment is the latest one we're working on in Wales. We've just submitted a response to Welsh Government's inquiry, which is fantastic. But we're pushing the fact that, look, Scotland's got one, it's not quite right, let's learn from that. England's got one, I'd argue it's not anywhere near as good as Scotland, but let's make Wales the best one it can be. So doing that on your own sometimes is quite hard work, but having the group to sort of bounce ideas off, share consultations, share draft things around and get comments back is really beneficial. And in Wales, particularly with my social farms and gardens hat on, we're doing quite a lot of work that really directly complements what the UAC sort of set off to do, and that's around access to land, particularly access to local authority farmland is a big area of our interest. And in fact, we've managed to squeeze out some money from Welsh Government to try and buy some farmland and create some of those Farmstart settings within Wales, which is fantastic. So I can see us copying some of the models that have worked really well. We've already got funding, which is great. So that takes some of the pressure off, and we can just learn from those doing it. And that peer-to-peer support that comes with the UAC is really brilliant. Another areas we're doing is things like procurement food hubs. So we've muscled in on some of those Southwest Procurement Hub conversations. And in Wales, we've managed to get 2 lots of funding to set up food hubs across Wales using some of the partners within the USA, like Open Food Network and things like that. And that's great because we hadn't got a huge presence of food hubs across Wales, but we will have over the next 2 years. And there's other project funding done the same. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's been challenging at times. That's absolutely fine. We've changed direction a few times. We've changed partners a few times. I think that's part of the curve. But yeah, thanks for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Gary. That's brilliant. I'll pass to Susie to introduce yourself, Susie, and then over to you.
Hi, thanks, Maddie. Yeah, hi, I'm Susie Russell. I'm the coordinator of the Community Supported Agriculture Network UK. And yeah, similar to Gary, was asked just to say a few words on the progress of UAC from our perspective, the added value it brings to our work and the wider movement and how it might develop. And I guess Gary has said quite a lot of what I would say, so apologies for repetition, but I guess, yeah, it's been a really organic, holistic, responsive group and process, which I think has shifted over time. It's been open to being questioned. It's taking on some of the sort of important overriding questions of the time in food growing and farming, and it's a really interesting. I mean, I think the COG is an interesting group of people who bring different ways of working, possibly more by luck than judge. I don't know, but it feels like it's brought together, yeah, some really interesting different perspectives and people with a lot of experience. I think the thing that does maybe hold us together and has, I think a lot of the people involved have got a lot of kind of facilitation and group work experience and problem solving and mapping skills, and I think that's really shaped the way the COG has worked. And I don't know whether that was intended from the beginning, but it certainly feels like an important part of how we've developed. It's been responsive and flexible, but also quite grounded. And one of the things I've been reflecting on recently, which I might not have said 6 months ago, but I think it's works quite a lot in liminal spaces. So in the spaces in between, so the sort of urban, peri-urban being one of those, but in other, it's gone into spaces where there was no one or there was a gap, and it's making links between those spaces and gaps, which I think has also been great. So I think I was sort of thinking about, like, yeah, I guess the other thing I was going to say is I have been quite outcomes based. I've been quite interested in watching my own process, in not enjoying the fact that we didn't have concrete outcomes, but kind of as we've moved, I've really appreciated that the lack of concrete outcomes in some ways has sort of allowed us to be flexible and responsive in a way which I don't think we would have been if we'd held tight to things more. So that's been a real shift for me. In terms of words that kind of I feel represent the work, I guess land, maps, hubs, designs, connection systems all kind of feel really important. It's, yeah, in terms of added value, it's given me access to different perspectives and a space to discuss new ideas. It's it made me, although I haven't made that many of the meetings, the kind of the connection into Farmstart and how that might affect CSA has been important for us. Also kind of work at local authority level and thinking about how as a movement and as an individual organisation we can influence the way that local authorities look at food and food growing and land. It's been a space of really easy connection with others, and I think it's been a really in a time when there's lots of encouragement to collaborate between organisations and a sort of rapidly growing movement around agroecology and small scale farming. I think it's been a model of good collaboration in many cases, possibly because it started from slightly outside the sort of usual suspects in agroecology. I don't know how it might develop. Who knows? I think it's really good at generating new thinking, bringing together diverse sets of people. I think we're really good at coming up with new ideas. Maybe we could think a bit more about sort of underpinning those long term. I mean, I'm not saying we don't, but there's a sort of sense of like, maybe now is the time to pull together and strengthen some bits of that work, as well as leaving the open threads that allow for generation of new ideas. I wrote, there's a sort of sense that we could have a much bigger impact, and maybe not thinking about how we could have that bigger impact is one way we could have it. I don't know if that makes sense, but it sort of feels a bit like the thing about not focusing on outcomes, that actually you end up with better ones. So I think that's, yeah, been a really interesting process. I'm glad to be part of.
Thank you so much, Susie. That's really interesting to hear. And thank you all of our COG who have put in their time and thought and consideration and expertise into guiding this project. So just a shout out also to Andy Goldring, Elizabeth Westaway, Nick Weir and Alison Sheffield, who are also in this room today. So thank you all very much. Our next little bit, we're going to just have a look at our end of year evaluations. So we did last year we did a really comprehensive year one evaluation, and it's been split into two things this year, a kind of a survey of our sort of partners that we've worked with most, for them to just fill in and give us feedback on what we've been up to and how it's been and how it's added value to their work and so on. And the other side of it has been a sort of governance review, and I'll be talking to Hilary Sudbury from the Cooperative Assistance Network in a bit, who will be just presenting an overview of her findings on that governance review. So how this project is run, how it all fits together, the transparency and accountability and relationships. We wanted to kind of reflect on that, how it's been and how it might be going forward. So I'm going to pass back to Jeremy first of all to just give a brief reflection on our kind of partner evaluation piece, which we're still sort of assimilating. So we haven't necessarily drawn like key points or whatever to share with you, but he's just going to cover a few points on what's come out of that.
Okay.
Jeremy.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks everyone so far. Really interesting to be described as being in a liminal space. We'll soon find out if that works when I try and press share screen in a moment, and we'll be in a virtual liminal space. The evaluations we've done, we haven't been required to do an annual evaluation by the funders, by any of the funders. We do send in obviously the required reporting forms, but we took the view last year that because this is a very, very unusual hybrid sort of way of working, that it would be really responsible to do some evaluation proactively, so that we can get genuine feedback from people, but also so that if people do ask us in the future, well, where does this mandate come from? We've got some substantiation. So we did this. I'm going to try and share my screen. If it doesn't work, I'll just have to talk to it. Where is it? This one here. There we go. So this is the Google document, which we'll make available shortly. It's not finished. This is as of today, and it says what it is. It's an evaluation. Only 12 people completed it, but that's actually quite a high percentage of the people that we asked to complete it. It's probably about 30% of the people. So it's starts off. It just says, what have you been involved in? The various projects that Maddie described, the Mappers Group, Cluster, Northern Pathfinders, Farmstarts, Policy Influence Group, member of the Core Oversight Group, etc. So that's just a list of what's in that chart, really. So I'm not going to read it all, obviously, but just to give you a couple of bits of feedback. This question here, what do you like about working with the UAC? And I've just highlighted a very few bits: openness, range of organisations, agile, responding to needs and ideas, networking with a lot of very dynamic people, mix of people and ideas, new ways of working, flexibility, responsiveness. I didn't write this. The UAC is brilliant at bringing together so many of the UK's urban agriculture projects. It's great to know what's going on. I'm impressed by the way in which UAC connects people from different spheres. So, you know, that's a sort of fairly representative sample, which obviously from our perspective is really helpful and really reassuring. And then we ask people what they'd like us to concentrate on in the future, if we've got funding beyond next year, and we'll come on to that further on in the afternoon's session. This is just to give us some sort of idea. Are you happy with your involvement with the UAC? Well, yes, people are generally pretty happy. Do we add value to your work? Well, yes, it appears we do, which is great. In what ways do you feel UAC adds value to your work? Provides advocacy, networking, being part of something bigger, legitimacy, knowledge of new developments, appreciation and making connections. So it's all positive feedback. So if we get further funding, what do you think we should look at geographically? Urban soil-based, urban controlled environments, urban peri-fringe, city region, county scale, and rural urban connections are clearly very well supported there. And then we asked, what do you think we should be focusing on beyond what we do now? So you can see, if you can read it, new voices, diversity, farm starts, more regional clusters, open source network mapping. But the one that's got the most support there is land use planning and for an urban something or other. I can't even see that. But, you know, it's fairly interesting responses. And then I go about collaborations. Who should we collaborate? Well, we've already been bringing in people like Land Workers Alliance. We do work with Sustain. We do work with Sustainable Food Places increasingly. But then there are other organisations mentioned here. Ecological Land Co-op, Lion, that's land in our name. And elsewhere it's mentioned local government associations in all parts of the country, different parts of the UK. So I think it just one at the bottom says, great to be part of this project. So I think that's enough of that. We will make that available on our website, and when that's available, we'll make sure you know about it. But I'd like to ask Hilary now, Hilary Sudbury, who we commissioned to do an independent bit of work on the governance, and she can explain what she found out. Please, Hilary.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'll just try and open my slides. Slideshow. Bear with me. Okay, so my role really was to carry out a governance review in relation to the Urban Agriculture Consortium, and on behalf of Green Future Associates, CIC. So I'm Hilary Sudbury. I work on behalf of Cooperative Assistance Network. We are a co-op, a workers co-op of co-op and social enterprise advisors. I'm based in Bristol, but we're not geographically limited as to where we work. So we have advisors who are based in different parts of the country. And I've been doing governance support for social enterprises and co-ops for more years than I care to remember. So here's just a real overview of my findings of this review. And I understand that the final report will be available as well once it's finalised. So starting off with the Mythology, I interviewed all 7 members of the Core Oversight Group and the project delivery team. And I know, as I've seen and has been said, the core oversight group, many members are here. So thank you so much for your time talking to me. And I really did enjoy talking to you and learning about the different sectors of urban agriculture that you're involved in. Additionally, I checked the public records at Companies House, and I talked to Linden Accountants to confirm statutory compliance. I had a look at some of the funding returns to make sure that the funding returns were completed and to a good standard. I haven't spoken to any of the funders, and I didn't speak to any of the pathfinders either. Good governance in terms of what I'm looking at. Good governance is critical to ensure an organisation is legally compliant and financially sound. Always good if it happens by design and not by accident. And there is a critical distinction that can be made between governance of an organisation and the day-to-day running of it. Now, in some smaller organisations, it may well be the same people who do both, but there's still a split in the roles. So I'm looking at the governance, the kind of overarching governance. In this, for the Urban Agriculture Consortium, Green Futures Associates, KIC is the accountable body, has the legal responsibility for delivery. The delivery is via Jeremy and Maddie, the small project team. Some delivery is subcontracted out to other organisations, and some funding goes directly to grassroots organisations. The core oversight group has the role of advisory steering group, and it has a memorandum of understanding in terms of reference document, although it was pointed out that actually this could be more concise. So I think that will be taken on for future funding. My conclusion was that, as we've already heard in some of the things that have gone before, it's a very valued and successful project. It's well managed and it's punching above its weight. I didn't find any issues that were extraordinary in the life of a funded project or a small organisation, and there was nothing by way of governance arrangements that required immediate attention. There are some potential issues, and I think they are, you know, as some of you will recognise if you're involved in funded projects, and that's having sufficient time for long-term strategy whilst also running a dynamic and innovative project. And that actually the COG members as the kind of oversight and steering group, they're all members of other organisations in their own right. So there are time constraints for them and their participation. So just really wanted to kind of give you a flavour of some of the quotes. So definitely, you know, there's a very competent project delivery team. The project outcomes have been very valuable. It's definitely facilitating change. It's fluid and fleet of foot, and the funding makes a big difference. And the project's reach is impressive. I mean, it's all very positive stuff. In terms of the coordination and facilitation, Maddie and Jeremy were complemented in many different ways. The information that was received by the COG, you know, is all of a good standard. Perhaps maybe too much, if there is such a thing. So it's stronger than the sum of its parts. The COG members and their own organisations and areas of special interest, it came across very clearly, and it's already come across in some people that have spoken already, that it not only brings benefits to the project, but actually for their individual organisations, there are benefits to being part of the Urban Agriculture Consortium. And in terms of what better might be, again, nothing that you wouldn't expect really, a sense that there's never enough time. So trying to really focus on agendas, focus on prioritising items, maybe prioritising strategy, and a sense that some opportunities might be missed and connections might be missed if there's not enough discussion around strategies. And if actually the use of the COG expertise isn't harnessed as well as it could be. And then finally, Jeremy has expressed that he would like to step back at some point. It's unlikely to happen before 2025. This wasn't something that was a secret. Everyone was aware of that I spoke to. And the key succession issues were quite clear. I think there's obviously the project governance within its accountable body. There's the flexibility and the ability to react quickly, and also to enable funding to be directed to grassroots organisations. I'm not going to read the quotes for you. And then finally, as part of the succession strategy, a future review of governance options was needed. So it was something that I brought up in my discussions with the COG members and the project team, and some of the different options were mentioned, and some people had a view on some and some on the other. But I think at this point it would be unfair to assume that there's any favoured approach at this stage, only that people are aware of the options and that it needs further and fuller discussion. So with that, I hope that was useful, and I'll see if I can stop sharing.
Really useful. It's been really useful, Hilary, I think, to all of us who took part in that. And we're already kind of taking some of those things forward with the COG partners in particular. So that's, yeah, it's been hugely helpful. Thank you so much for doing that piece of work. We're going to bask in that glory and with a cup of tea. So let's all have a 5-minute pause, and then we'll come back and hear from Bethan and Jess and others. See you in 5. Right, welcome back, everybody. So we're going to, we're going into what we're calling part 2. So this is, we're going to be hearing from our couple of our partners on the ground, Bethan, who is in Nottingham, and Jess, who is in Sheffield. So warm welcome to you guys. And I actually wanted to also say that it's really exciting to have somebody here who is in the Office of Urban Agriculture from Rosario. Because Rosario in Argentina is such an incredible inspiration when it comes to urban agroecology at a really significant scale. And do look them up if you don't know about Rosario. They've won major awards for their work and are inspiring people around the world. So it's really great to have you here. So I've just put on here a couple of links to, not that it's only The Guardian that kind of talks about this kind of stuff, but these two articles were particularly kind of pertinent to where we find ourselves today, as I said at the beginning. And I've put the links in the chat there. So if you haven't read and seen those articles, they're kind of quite eye-opening and help to guide us in our work, really. We wanted to reflect a bit on what we're learning through our work. And try to boil it down. I mean, there's all kinds of things, but trying to sort of boil it down to some key things. And they may well be things that all of you are very familiar with and have your own interpretation of, or some may be more surprising than others, I don't know. So really this critical piece that that change, despite best intentions, change isn't really happening fast enough in relation to the demise of the global food system that we're familiar with. And the focus in urban areas still tends to be predominantly on allotments and community gardens, more so than what we're really advocating for, what many of us here are advocating for, which is that upscaling to the next scale of small scale and medium scale farm enterprises in peri-urban and urban areas. Councils at local or regional level are often constrained, particularly in England, and need to really be released from the constraints of their own structures, politics even, and processes, and to be freed from being undermined or stymied by some of the ideology or process that is kind of holding sway at national level. And the local government policy making processes need to evolve in order to deliver change at the speed required to enable the visions and inspiration that many working in local government hold, but to enable these visions and inspiration to translate directly into tangible policy and investment decisions without being compromised or diluted out of recognition. And also local governments need to be able to transcend the constraints and objectives of national policy, find ways to flow around these boulders, to widen the river, as it were, to flow around some of these barriers and constraints. So more collaborative ways of working have accelerated and are working really well. And that's really an observation across the board, whether that's kind of national or regional or local organisations, growers, councils, and food partnerships are very much catalyst for many of these things. And they're trying to, there's a process of trying to de-silo and use other levers for change, such as the People's Jury process in Lancaster, which guided policy, and or joined up city visions like the One City approach in Bristol, for example. Participating in UAC is one of those means of collaborating, and other kinds of partnership working, and that people really want collaborative spaces where open mind, open heart, and open will are welcomed. There are cultural and structural gaps between institutions, departments within institutions, and all of those with farmers and growers and urban and peri-urban communities, particularly in creative and decision-making spaces. Though food partnerships and other collaborations are starting to build bridges between them. Change is propelled by trusting collaborations, space for community-led innovation, and champions, whatever form that might take. More and more people are converging around, in interesting ways, around this notion that recognises that our economic system is the cause of our current crises, and that we need to think about different economic models as a way of proliferating change across all of our systems. And that's really coming to the fore. And to proliferate localized prototyping and upscaling. So it's really about increasing these spaces for experimentation and easing up on the risk aversion, that sort of thing. Positive changes happening on the ground where localized prototyping is funded and enabled. So I'm going to pass now to Bethan from Nottingham, who we've been working with for the last year, perhaps. And she's the lead on many things, spinning many plates, but the lead on the Farmstart work there. And we'll then go to Sheffield and a Jessica Wilson and a local authorities perspective, and Sheffield's really trying to innovate in this space, which is really fantastic. We wanted to give a platform to that, and then I think we'll come back to Jeremy on a few other reflections.
Thank you, Maddie. Can everyone hear me and see my screen?
Yeah.
Fabulous. So hi everybody, I'm Bethan McIlroy from Nottingham, and I've been working, like Maddie said, with the UAC as part of the Northern Pathfinders for the past roughly about a year. I think we started around this time, June, July. So I was put in the north because, of course, anything above Watford Gap is north, but we have decided that we will create a Midlands cluster off the back of that. So I've been working with the Nottingham Good Food Partnership, but I've also been part of community growing in Nottingham Organic Gardeners, and yes, as Maddie said, spinning a few tea plates. So just to give you a bit of context in case you don't know where the North Nottingham is, you can see here Nottingham is quite a big county, so is Derbyshire. And then you can see I've zoomed in to show both our cities because I've been working across both of them in order to do what we want to do. So as part of that northern cluster, we were taking those workshops from all of the great people that we've been working with, just learning what worked for them and what didn't. And as Fran was saying from Sheffield, those collaborative networks that we've had, being able to be held accountable and do the work has really, really benefited. And it also provided us a couple of funding links and just getting in touch with funders and points of contact across the region to open up our networks and to really start the Farmstart process. And that interest from our local authority, from Nottinghamshire City Council and the County Council has been really positive. Having that brand of the UAC behind us has been really vital in giving legitimacy to our projects. And I'm sure you have all heard about the small food bakery that is run by my friend and mentor, Kimberly Bell. Unfortunately, she couldn't make today's meeting because she's on holiday, but she has been the pioneer in Nottingham of local food and has helped set up an urban city mill and new bakery. And she also hosts the UK Grain Lab. And she is the real pioneer for real connections with real farmers and supporting that. And she's helped support me in our journey of bartering systems and setting up local food networks. And she wants to turn, with me, wants to help to Nottingham, not just focused on grain, but also focused on vegetables and food for real people. But I think some of the negatives have been shown as well, the fluctuations because of COVID. We have a local neighbour food market, which is, you know, the online food market, and they went from 40 boxes to 200 during the COVID pandemic, but now they're still back down to 40. So that regional shopping and the local shopping really went sky high, but people soon have gone back to use the supermarkets, and I'm not quite sure why that is. I don't know whether it's because of cost, you know, the perceived cost of good organic food is seen a lot higher than the supermarkets, and it just then narrows your region and your market down to a smaller, more affluent population. So there are some issues around that. But the City Council has helped set up crop drop shares. It's quite a mouthful to say, where local allotment produce is being shared across regions and food banks that needs it. So there's been some positives as well. So our access to land is always an issue as part of the Farmstart projects. And interestingly, I wanted to talk about our city centre has what I call the white shopping centre of doom. I'm sure you've all heard of it. It's called Broadmarsh, and it's essentially being knocked down. And the City Council is in talks with Heatherwick, the architect down in London, who wants to create a green urban environment. And I think it's really important to engage with the City Council right now before they fasten any of those plans and put more concrete or not down in there. I've also been trying to get access to a walled garden of our Woollerton Museum, which is only 2 miles away from our city centre, and use that as one of the Farmstart hubs. But I would say, I don't think at the moment the City Council and the CEO of the whole garden, they don't quite understand what the Farmstart network is. So we need to just get them all into a room, make sure they understand and see the benefits of having people like us on board to turn that garden into what could be a new pioneering vision of urban agriculture in the city. And I've also been working as a consultant over in Derby City Centre, where I thought that the City Council is slightly smaller, so they seem to be a lot more on board and a lot quicker. However, they keep on saying, oh, yes, we can get you that access to that land. Sure, we've got this field you can use. Oh, yeah, we've got an urban rooftop that you can use as a new urban city centre farm. Sometimes it's all words, but actually coming into practice and getting the land is taking more time than we expected. So there's pros and cons. So in terms of that, we really need to start finding our Farmstart applicants and who wants to take part in the project. And we also need to be part of the mapping projects to help, you know, fix the people that want the access to the land and prevent these delays. If we just have a list of land and who owns it and what the cost is, it really prevents us having to restart the wheel every time we do it. And I really liked the message from the Sheffield Farmstart, which is maybe create the farm first and then create the Farmstart. But I think there's opportunities in both. We're partnering and we're in conversation at the moment with the local universities and college to provide the recruitment route into Farmstart, because we have a lot of horticultural and agricultural colleges around us in the Midlands. However, we need to get into proper conversations with how they can be part of this Farmstart network. And of course, I want to focus on the emphasis of business incubation and not community gardening. And one of our partner Farmstarts, they ran a workshop called "Are you sure you want to be a farmer?", which was to really put people off before they even started the course. So I would like to replicate that. So what we need to do next is do a bit of a media launch and direct share with our local producers and our local growers, and to start to collaborate the demand for land survey, so create that land matching service, and engage with our mapping communities. And in a personal context, I do just want to hold my hands up and say, even though I've been part of the Farmstart network for nearly a year, things may be going a bit slower in Nottingham as they should be, because I've been, as my friend said, I'm not spinning plates, I've been trying to spin easels. And so I am trying to focus more on the Farmstart this year. So last year I thought I'd be setting up my own CSA, but I joined the Farmstart programme instead. I'm also a head gardener for a Michelin star restaurant, and I've been working in Derby as their lead fundraiser, which was really important because I've managed to get a lot of funding in for their Severn Trent Community Award to set up composting in their first urban farm. And I've seen as part of that work that there are, in our Severn Trent region, which covers multiple counties, there are loads of community gardeners doing this work already. But if we shared and had more of a collaborative Midlands cluster, we would all benefit from that. So what's next? I think joining the two cities together as part of a really inclusive cycle. I'm finally going to help write these surveys and get them out to local food businesses, sort out the land mapping issues that we've got in Nottingham, and make sure that the land that we do have access to is on peppercorn rent and for a long period of time. But essentially we need, I need more time, more money, and I need a bit of a team behind me to help support this work. So, and I think it's really important to say, as Maddie shared with the Guardian article today, you know, if the government aren't going to make this policy and do it, we need to do it ourselves. I think that's it from me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Beth. And it's so great to work with you, and thank you for, you know, coming along today and sharing your experience. And it's really great, and it's brilliant to be able to support you and that you're part of this consortium. Yeah, make as much use of it as you possibly can. I'd like to introduce now Jessica Wilson, who is in public health in Sheffield. And Sheffield have been doing some really interesting policy development, which she's going to talk about, pros and cons, and what that journey's been like and what they're trying to achieve within the council in Sheffield. So warm welcome to you, Jessica. Over to you.
Thank you. Let me just see if I can share my screen. I'm a bit of we don't use Zoom very often, so I'm having to remind myself how we're doing here. I've only got 3 slides, but it's often useful just to help me. Everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so as Maddie said, I'm in the public health team at Sheffield City Council, and my kind of lead area is food and obesity. So kind of historically, mainly come at that from a obesity prevention, obesogenic environments perspective, but increasingly in Sheffield and in other public health teams across the country, we're talking about food more and more, and that wider food system, taking that wider food system perspective. So I will say I'm by no means an expert on urban agriculture. It's the first time I've been to this network, but I can hopefully give you a perspective of kind of what it's like developing this policy and trying to get some projects off the ground in a council perspective, and some of those constraints that Maddie talked about and the frustrations that Bethan talked about are, you know, they're the same things that we come across in Sheffield. So just a bit of context, last year there was a resolution passed by Sheffield's full council on the right to food. It was primarily a resolution about making a statement around food poverty and food access and the need for food access, but there were a range of amendments that were added. onto that as it went through council, which broadened the scope of that out much more to include the need for a new food strategy for Sheffield that goes beyond the traditional kind of public health concerns and looks at the whole food system, including sustainability and the role of the local economy. So there's a commitment to developing that, which is in process at the moment. And then there are also some specific points in there that were acknowledged around the role that urban agriculture can play and the benefits that bring, that were kind of signed up to by full council, and that I'm sure everyone here is well aware of. And as part of that amendment, there was a new commitment to working more collaboratively with partners in the city, including Sheffield, our food partnership, to try and tackle some of the food system issues. And I think it's fair to say that previously those partnerships hadn't been strong, but there's a new kind of willingness to work much more collaboratively and kind of work with those experts that are not necessarily within the council. And then there's also this, the last item on this slide is around seeking to protect the use of greenbelt land around Sheffield for sustainable agriculture and nature. So the commitment is there. The kind of Jeremy asked me the question, how do we do some of those things, and then that still remains the $1 million question. But I can talk about some specific projects. So I'm just writing the new food strategy for Sheffield at the moment. That's hopefully going to be formally signed up to in September this year. So the aspirations of that are around a fairer food system, healthier food system, a greener food system, which is where most of the potential actions around urban agriculture and farming and food growing can come in there, as well as looking at things like food waste and procurement of food and what levers the council's got that can stimulate a more sustainable food environment, and also considering the role that food can play in part of our local economy. And we're just currently developing our new economic strategy for Sheffield, which is going to be a big shift from the previous policy, which was very much about growth. All the language now is very much about a well-being economy and an inclusive economy, and it's increasingly clear that food and the food enterprises are perfect examples of what an inclusive economy can look like, and a sustainable economy. So I think there's kind of a growing appreciation across the council where food can fit in kind of beyond the sort of public health box that it's previously been put into. So I'll just talk a little bit about some irons that are in the fire at the moment, some projects that are kind of, we're trying to get off the ground. Nothing is in place yet, and I can talk about some of the challenges and the things that are making progress slow and at times difficult with some of those projects, but there's definitely a willingness to try and get some of these things off the ground. So the council's match funded a coordination role with the Chef Food Partnership, of which Regather and Foodworks Sheffield are two of the key partners that are involved in that food partnership, and that's mainly around getting the Sustainable Food Places Silver Award and developing that partnership. Some specific conversations that are ongoing at the moment are with a local food growing organisation that I know a lot of you will know, Regather, and our Parks and Countryside team around some certain sites that they would like to make use of. So there's some disused allotment, there's disused bowling green, there's some glass houses that the council owns. So we're just trying to work through the practicalities of how we can make those proposals reality, and some of the challenges that we face there. I know a lot of you will be familiar with it. It's the commercial processes is the key barrier. So Regather would say, to be able to put their efforts into developing a business case for something, they need to have access to it. They need to have information about what the potential of that site is. They need to be invited in. For us at the council, it's difficult for us to start to do that, because in terms of being open and transparent and having a commercial process, we can't be seen to be favouring a particular organisation. So there's difficult ground to tread there, and it becomes a bit chicken and egg. They need enough information to be able to develop their proposals. We can't give them too much information to give them an unfair advantage. So we're working our way through that, and I think those conversations are working in a positive way now. But it is a key challenge. We've had another inquiry from a different organisation who wanted to put some glass houses next to our incinerator to kind of capture the heat. They wanted that on a peppercorn mint, but we've got commercial providers that are interested in that land who would pay us commercial rates. And so for a council that's strapped for cash, yes, it sounds like a really good project, but on the other hand, we've got to balance the books at the end of the day. And so there are difficult balancing acts to be made there, and so there's a constant kind of there's just a constant line to be trodden around kind of what we might want to do and what we're actually able to do in reality. One of the projects that's been proposed is around using some disused allotment sites for market garden training. The council's allotment manager is really supportive of that. However, allotment law means that we're not allowed to reduce the number of allotments that the council has. We have to prove, in order to be able to change the use of the allotments, we have to be able to prove that they're truly surplus. But in Sheffield, the reality is that we've got a waiting list for allotments. It's just that people don't want allotments in the place where the disused ones are. So again, there's challenges there between what we might want to do and actually what legally we are allowed to do, and working through the implications of that and doing all the things we need to do to prove that those allotments are surplus to requirements is costly and lengthy as a process. Other interests that we have to balance is things like friends of groups. So some of the projects with parks and countryside involve land that's owned by parks, big city parks, friends of groups that have often and at times tense relationships with the council over decisions council made. So we have to tread very carefully around where we might want to do something differently in a park, or something that might be perceived as taking land use away from being kind of public to something that might need to be fenced off, for example. We have to tread very carefully around how we engage friends of groups in those conversations. Another piece of work that is ongoing in Sheffield at the moment that I'm not directly involved in, so I only have a fairly high level understanding of, is a strategic land review. So that's looking at all the land we own as a council and what the potential uses of that land might be. So that report is due back imminently, I'm told. But the challenges that we'll have there when that comes back, it won't make any recommendations about how the land is used. It will just say what land we've got and what those potential uses might be, and there will be competing priorities for all of that land, competing things that we might use it for, and ultimately there will need to be political decisions made over which certain sites and what the priorities are. And then the other constraints are what can we actually do with that land. A lot of the land that Sheffield City Council owns is freehold reversion, which I'm by no means an expert on, but I think basically it means we don't actually own it properly for another 150 years. So we're very limited. You know, we might want to do things with it, but what we can legally do with it is constrained. We have existing tenants, we have existing long-term leases. So on paper, it might look like we're listening. You know, we could be doing lots with it that we aren't doing. Actually, when you get down to the brass tacks and the practicalities of it, it's never as straightforward as it might seem. So they're the constraints we're under. But I think the positive thing is that we are having the conversations now that we weren't having a few years ago, and so there certainly is a willingness to try and progress some of these things, and positive, constructive conversations happening to try and kind of find a way through some of the tricky problems. So I'll stop sharing. How do I stop sharing? So I hope that was useful.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Jess. So much to think about. And it's very complex, isn't it, to take these very established kind of structures and processes and apply them when you need to do something quite radical and fast.
And often you're trying to engage with people whose core interest isn't food. So it is, you know, it's someone who works in a parks service or property services or legal. So it's, you know, I'm the only person with food in their job title in the council, and so food is it's just a tiny bit of other people's jobs. It's often hard to get it kind of up their to-do list. Yeah,
absolutely. We've got a couple of things come through on the chat. Is it all right, Jeremy, if I just cover these before we come to you?
Yeah.
Where are we? Bethan, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, so I suppose mine's for Jess, please. So, you know, you talked about the balancing act for commercialisation on land. Could you do like a weighting system? So is it food? Is it for the environment? Is it for social use? Is it for community groups? And then weight it that way? Would that be better? And is there something already in place for that?
I don't believe there is something already in place for that. I guess it's a conversation I'd need to have, or that would need to be had with our property services teams. I have to admit, I don't understand the full process that they go through when deciding the best use for land, and often it comes down to if there's a political will for something to happen, they can find a way to make it happen. But there isn't a, I think it would be a nice idea to have kind of something fairly transparent like that, but I don't think that we have anything at the moment that does that.
Thank you.
Something to work on.
We do have social in our procurement. There's often there is scope for social value to be brought into things. So we could maybe, so if we're procuring or having a commercial process to let a site out, then I think we could maybe strengthen that. That perhaps is an avenue to go down.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, do you want to speak to your, if it's a question or more of a comment?
Yes, it was more of a comment. It's just that we found that we couldn't get access to land really without coming together as a community and approaching a private landowner to discuss face to face really some of these issues. There are a lot of people sitting on land. It isn't easy for a farmer to part with his land, but if you're local and you know that farmer and you can have a conversation with him, and you have some competent land managers within your community, that's essential, then there's no reason why we can't, as community groups, approach the farmers and the existing landowners that we have in the hinterland, those that are not massive, massive conglomerates, as it were. So we found that we started with one farmer that gave us a 3 acre field. He didn't want much rent for it. It wasn't good agricultural land, but we managed to establish a CSA on it and fed 50 families for about 2 or 3 years, and then before we decided to rent more land to expand. And in order to do that, we had to go through the Ecological Land Cooperative, because it's simply impossible to afford or to buy good agricultural land in this country. I think if we think that we're suddenly going to get access to enough land to feed our cities, I think we're dreaming. We're going to have to demand it really as a human right, but be prepared to step up and take that responsibility on ourselves. I think councils are very limited in what they can do. They're under huge pressure financially, and that's by design and not by accident. So I think we're sometimes a little bit naive thinking that the system actually wants to help us all become sustainable, but it simply doesn't. There's too much riding on maintaining the status quo. So I think community-based action, instead of leaving it to individuals to try and figure out how they're going to get on land, councils really are to do with more allotments, small-scale community growing spaces where you can educate, but you're not going to feed the cities that way. You have to have access to large-scale agriculture to do that. So all of these initiatives are really, really important and very inspiring for me. But as an individual, I had to just club together with 50 other people and decide to do something. And that's worked for us. 7 years on, we're now feeding 130 families a week, all year round. So I would suggest that would never have happened if we tried to do it as individuals. So I think community supported agriculture schemes are really a part of the solution. They're not the whole solution. They can't feed everybody, but we have 130 families that are being well fed, and their children also. So just wanted to make that comment.
May I come in now? Hello?
Yes, certainly. Where are you based? Yeah, where are you based, Jeff?
Oh, sorry, I'm with Kaitan CSA, based in the Gower in South Wales.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you, lovely. Jane, yeah, just a brief one, I think.
Hello, I'm from Birchfields Park Forest Garden and the National Forest Gardening Scheme, and one or two other things in between, like Friends of Parks nearby me and a Manchester Permaculture Network. I believe that we have, Jeff is not wrong, he was absolutely right, but we have to access land in all sorts of spaces and at every level, as I think has been well demonstrated by projects such as ours and the incredible edible networks. And I think, Jessica, you're wrong to say that it's that hard to work through the tensions between Friends of Parks and councils, and in particular that we need to work with all the miscellaneous owners of land. In the National Forest Gardening Scheme at the moment, we've been concentrating on health-based initiatives. And of course, hospitals and health centres do have significant pieces of land, as well as parks and countryside that local government owns. But there are many, many other patches of land on schools and universities, and particularly managed by housing providers, that have the potential not just for the forest gardens of the size of ours, which is about 50 metres across, but much larger food forests. And we really need to get land management, that publicly owned land, connected to community food growers in every which way that we can. And I think that our National Forest Gardening Scheme, incredible edible networks, and I see Andy's here from the Permaculture Association. I think that between us and the social farms and community gardens, we should be able to access much more land in all sorts of places, and certainly not just bowling greens and greenhouses, Jessica. We need to plant all kinds of land. I worked in local government myself until about 10 years ago, and Manchester and Sheffield seem to have got stuck. They haven't made much progress as local government, and I think people in public health need to help us lever the change.
Thank you very much, Jane. Thank you. Yeah, there's definitely something in there for me around the mapping and the how do we identify and know what we've got. And I'd really love to connect with Sheffield more around the mapping community that we help convene, because there's been some amazing examples of some mapping work that's been done among them that I think could be really helpful in accelerating some of this and bringing data sets together in a very accessible way. And also, yeah, that it sort of connects with some of those other pieces around different kind of economic models, different economic approaches, moving towards commoning and community ownership of assets and agency, which is really part of food sovereignty and the wresting of control over the means of production from the kind of, you know, the corporate world, and bringing it into those who put people and planet first, essentially, and have a connection to their bioregion, their local place, and to their local community. So it's really about this shift in power and control, I think, that we're all participating in. Andy, just a quick one, and then I want to pass on to Jeremy. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, just really quick. So I think listening to this, it reminds me that one of the key changes that needs to happen is in the planning system. So one of the ways we need to kind of enable an edible landscape, an edibly landscaped city to emerge is to ensure that that happens through every single planning application. And that means changing the local plan and the planning guidance and seeing what we can do at the local level to achieve that. Yeah, so I think Jane is right. There's lots of different spaces that can be used in lots of different ways. but fundamentally we need to build it into the planning system. You know, it's great to see that Jessica's in Sheffield, there's that commitment for green space, but we can do that around every single, you know, new housing development and so on. So yeah, I just wanted to make that point about planning being a kind of key area too.
Okay, great. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Bethan. Thanks, Jessica, and other contributors. Needless to say, we're running behind our intended schedule. So I'm just going to quickly rattle through. We've heard from some people, grassroots people on the ground. We've heard from a major English metropolitan authority, and I'd invited Duncan Williamson from Nourish in Scotland to talk about Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration and COP27. Unfortunately, he pulled out this morning because he was in the Highlands of Scotland and had no internet connection. So I'm going to do my best just to give you a very brief summary. And the rationale for doing this is that there are some international protocols and policy frameworks out there which you can take off the shelf with your local council and say, sign this today, to give you hopefully a bit of leverage. So first of all, there's the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, which was created in 2015, and that's an international agreement among cities all over the world committed to develop sustainable food systems, resilient, safe and diverse, that provide healthy food, and also to mitigate the impact of climate change. So you can look that up, Milan Urban Food Policy Pact. Last year, in the run-up to COP26, there was the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration, which I know a lot of you already know about. There's quite a lot of British cities signed up to it. And this highlights the fact that cities and regions are leading the way in pioneering integrated food policies in order to reduce environmental footprint, drive positive food system change, and ensure greater resilience to shocks. And those shocks are fairly obvious nowadays what they are. And again, if you want to look that up, it talks about that COVID-19 exposing the fragility of the food systems, but obviously now we've got the Ukrainian situation as well. Now, the cities that have signed up to that are quite numerous. I'm just going to very rapidly put a, if I can get there, no, I can't, never mind, too technical. There are cities all over the UK that are signed up to it, from West Lothian down to Leeds, Greenwich, and some in Ireland as well. But you can look that up on their site. We did a very rapid survey of local authorities across the country to see what was going on, and we couldn't find any what we call game-changing policies, but there are lots of good examples. We've heard from Sheffield, so just a couple of examples. Brighton and Hove have a food strategy action plan, a city planning, and various policy advice notes, which include food growing in new build and hopefully protection of green spaces. Bristol has its One City plan, which includes a commitment or aspiration to create food growing areas within every ward of the city along agroecology regenerative lines. Lancaster has its food growing in response to climate emergency. The Citizens Jury has Hope Spot mapping as well. Sorry, I'm rattling through these. Excuse me if I leave stuff out. Leeds has planning policies under review, but they are still in development. So we'll see how that pans out. Liverpool has green spaces and food growing written into its infrastructure policy of the Liverpool local plan. And Nottingham, we heard from, has a wellbeing design guide. And what I've asked Duncan to talk about was COP26 and COP27. Now, our understanding is that agroecology was almost included in the final communique from COP26. And the aspiration is that it will be included in COP27, which is in Egypt this November. The Egyptian government, this is information that we have got from Nourish and people in the know. The focus of COP27 remains adaptation, but how multi-level governance can deliver progress on climate goals. And the Egyptian ministry has announced several initiatives on adaptation and food security will come out of COP27. And the COP presidency hosted a consultation on agriculture and adaptation earlier this year. There'll be various food systems pavilions raising awareness of food and agriculture, including focuses on nutrition, human health, climate resilience, emerging technologies and ideas, and other ones focusing on just transition, a just transition, women, Indigenous communities, food and innovation. However, as we've heard, the vested interests are also looking at high-tech interventions, and agribusiness is playing a major role in sponsoring this, the COP27. So we need to be realistic about what might be achieved, but the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration does give you some sort of leverage. So please get your local authority, if it hasn't already done so, to sign up to it and use it as a lever to accelerate action at a city region level. So I'm now going to hand back to Maddie to improvise the remaining 20 minutes.
Thanks very much. Yes, so and that also connects very strongly to something that came out in our last ping about planning and food security, which was about the importance of the strategic plan for a council. That if it's in the council's sort of corporate plan, if you like, I think it's called, that some of these commitments, these kind of you know, to zero carbon and all of those things, and health and food security, then that can proliferate from the point of the strategic plan down through. It's something that departments can then hook all kinds of different pieces of work on and really stretch what's possible. So yes, we've got a last 20 minutes. So we've got what we'd really like to ascertain is your thoughts on where we go from here collectively. So we came across, let me find it again, this particularly pertinent GIF, which I'm just going to bring up. We were thinking about what is it that we are, hopefully it will appear. Oh, that was our pièce de résistance.
Oh.
It's not coming up, is it?
Not at the moment.
So we're really, yeah, the image was of a solar system essentially, with lots of planets kind of in orbit of each other, circling around the sun at the center. And it was really helpful. I'll
put that up.
Okay, yeah. So we were thinking, what is our sun? And
I've buggered it up.
And there are many things that might be considered to be at the center. Can you put the other one back on?
I'll try. Yeah, sorry.
So things like, you know, the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration, that's it, that's the sun around which we, as a kind of mycelial connected ecosystem of people and organizations and thought and practice, is that what we want to gather around? Is it the National Food Strategy? Is it the right to food or the right to grow? Is it a new economic paradigm? Is it ecological regeneration? Is it stabilizing climate? Is it degrowth? You know, what is it? Food sovereignty? And it's a question really that I want to put to you. We have quite a few other slides about the direction of travel as far as UAC sees it, and going into some quite specifics about mapping and farm starts and community control of assets and that sort of thing. I think it'd be really great to hear from all of you about your reflections on what you've heard and on your own practice in relation to this question, what is our sun? Is there something that we're all converging around? Because the more we do that, the greater the force of the movement and the greater the number of levers that we can push together. So over to you. Any thoughts on that? What is our sun? And as the Urban Agriculture Consortium and all the people in it and all the people connected to it, what are we moving around? So please speak. Tanya, if you want to just unmute and share your thoughts.
I would just boringly say it is actually urban agriculture. It's increasing food production in the city and around the city, and increasing good supply chains with sort of kind of county scale, but really, yeah, just growing a fantastic food system in and around the city. And I think that's our unique selling point. And there's a huge amount of work to do with that, and all those other things, other planets going around that, and integrated in that vision. But for me, it's a very clear focus on how can we make edible, productive, biodiverse settlements that meet our needs in a really sustainable and regenerative way. There you are. That's my 2 pence.
Thank you, Andy.
I was just going to butt in as a Welshman with very few cities to sort of broaden that a little bit to, I think, just, yeah, food growing spaces that are really connected to communities sort of works for us in Wales, because actually it's really rural in most, although we've got a new city now thanks to the Queen. But yeah, there's that real challenge in those densely urban populated areas, and I think we're all really keen to address that to the best of our ability. The challenges with it, many of us have seen the work that Incredible Edible are doing on their Right to Grow campaign and policy, and that's got some traction. It will go through a private members bill process in Westminster relatively shortly. Be interesting to see if it's taken up and adopted. We know that Sustain taking an event to the House of Commons next week, actually, I think the 14th, and that will gain a bit of traction, I'm sure. But as Jeff sort of mentioned, actually in Wales particularly, the challenge is actually there's an awful lot of land out there, but it's just not accessible because it's so vastly expensive. We've got the highest cost per acre now in Wales across the whole of the UK, and that's just utterly bonkers. We've got the highest prices, house rise prices across the UK as well, and it's just really forcing people out of the area and actually forcing them into those really urban places where nobody really wants to live at the moment. So yeah, just not challenge your comments, Andy, at all, because you're absolutely right. But in Wales, we just broaden it to food growing connected to communities.
Thank you. Anyone else got any thoughts around what we can connect around and how we do that? Dan.
Thanks, Paddy. I shouldn't be one really applaud my predecessors, Andy and Gary, their last points. I think I really strongly agree with Andy's fundamental sort of sun point about urban agriculture, but taking on board Gary's comment about the lack of cities in Wales, I think the point I was just going to make was that I've been working for a number of years with European colleagues around urban horticulture in particular. And I think what's quite plain is that the separation of countryside and city as food productive places really crystallized after the Second World War. And there's plenty of evidence from continental Europe, but also from Britain. You know, Caroline Steele is a great advocate of this, and Susan Parham at Hertfordshire University, that you know, the kind of the function of the city space has been separated from food production, and it's been really, really hard to overcome that separation for the last sort of 3 or 4 generations. So I would simply say that I think this idea that we that our sun is the idea that urban space is a viable and actually plausible and historically normal place in which to include food production. That message needs to get through. It's really, really hard to do that through the planning system. And I really acknowledge the work that so many of the cities that we've heard from today and at other times have done. And it is such an inspiration compared to the, that subnational level is an inspiration compared to the national level, which is still approaching food policy in terms of agricultural productivity and efficiency. So anyway, I've rambled on typically as an academic, so I'll shut up. But thank you, my predecessors, for making that point. I agree with you. I would say, putting through that narrative that city spaces or urban, let's call them urban spaces, are viable, productive areas is important, and to take heart from the fact that it's been like that in our continent for very close to 600 to 800 years.
Brilliant, thank you, Dan. Yeah. Who else would like to chip in? We'd love to hear from all of you. Jeff, go on.
Yes, well, it's been really enlightening for me. It's really important to have these discussions, I think, and so kudos to all of you for doing this. The thing is it's a hugely complicated problem that we're talking about: access to land, healthy food for everyone, the whole industrial agriculture system. We shouldn't underestimate the challenge of transforming it. I think that's our worst enemy, to think that we can just create wish lists and have it happen. So I think really it's really heartening to hear some of these cities exploring what the obstacles are. I've been trying to do that, for nearly 10 years in Swansea, and I do live on the outskirts, or actually I live in Swansea, so one of the few cities in Wales, and we are facing the same issues. It's difficult to see how small scale initiatives are going to feed 200,000 people that are all completely dependent upon supermarkets and so on and so forth. So it's a huge educational challenge. But all of these things have to happen at the same time. It's not a matter of, should we do this or should we do that? So I think the idea that it's really about healthy food for everyone, isn't it? It's like a human right to access healthy food for everyone, particularly children who aren't in a position to make that intellectual choice. So I think it's great to have this right on the agenda, and hopefully we can actually get into a position where we can start affecting things. I'm also a member of the LWA, so we do a lot of work lobbying DEFRA. It's like banging your head against a brick wall, basically, but we continue to do it. Kudos to all for even being concerned with these matters, and I'm really glad that I joined the meeting.
Thank you. Just had a flurry of hands. Would it be all right, Jane, if we could just hear from Lauren and Nick, because we haven't heard from them previously, and then just and then come to you, and then Jeremy will do a bit of a wrap up. We've got 5 minutes to go till we close. So over to you, Lauren.
I agree with what everyone has said so far, but I don't know, when I was thinking about what the sun is, there's something about a living system for me, and it may be an oversimplified kind of reflection of what that sun could potentially be. There seems to be kind of like I don't know, listening to what people have said and things like that is moving away from a stagnation or a kind of like trying to stop blockages and things like that. So therefore it's living and it's moving. But that might be a very much an oversimplified viewpoint of that.
Thank you. I think sometimes there's nothing wrong with simple when everything is very complex. Yeah, thank you. Nick.
Thank you, Maddie. I think I want to support everything that's been said so far about what's at the centre, but I think for me the most important thing about that graphic is the interconnectedness, and I think we've heard a lot this afternoon about how interconnected the Urban Agriculture Consortium is and how we depend on each other. Jeff made the point, how can small scale projects feed 200,000 people? If there's enough of them, and if they connect with each other, and if they support each other, and if they share knowledge and understanding and wisdom, then our collective consciousness can do this thing. So for me, the important thing is about connections, interconnectivity.
Thank you, Nick. Jane, do you want to make a quick point and then pass back to Jeremy? Or you're muted.
I just wanted to add in suburban, that we mustn't get too stuck on cities, because it's all kinds of urban areas, including very large villages that need to grow more food. In some rural areas, people live with very little access to all the land that's around them. And also that we need to access whatever food is as local as possible that's in season, including managing our purchases from the Mediterranean and other places at the right times of year. So it's getting more seasonality into how people eat in our markets could make a lot of difference, and always being able to get our local oats and potatoes and so on.
Okay, right.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody. We're just going to try and finish as we said we would at 4 o'clock. Thank you ever so much, everyone. Obviously, thanks ever so much to Maddie, who, as you can see, manages to facilitate and whatever you call this word, curate the Urban Agriculture Consortium with the most sensitive and deft touch. Shut up, shouting, whoever that was. So reflecting on what we've heard today, this is actually the culmination of the last 12 months bit of work for us. And it is partly by accident, as Susie said earlier on, but it's sort of like a deliberate policy to be a little bit woolly and allow things to develop in their own way, to listen to voices that aren't always the same ones that we, to new voices and old voices, and actually try and create a new dynamic and a new way forward. And reflecting on what we heard from Catherine, from Fran, from Gary, from Susie, Hilary, looking at the evaluation things, people saying, oh yeah, it's a new way of working. It's really exciting. It's really dynamic. It's connecting. It's creating opportunities. And that's really what I think the strong point of this is. I'd also like to really thank Bethan and Jess for their contributions. And I think the openness and honesty and willingness to share warts and all, as we say, is a great, well, it's a great privilege, because it means you trust us to come into this space and tell it as it is. So we will reflect on everything that's been said. We'll reflect on what's in the governance review, the evaluation, and we'll be inviting you to our future events. The next public event is on the 21st of September. That'll be another Policy Influencers Network group, and then on the 17th of November. And with that, thanks very much, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thanks very much. We will share the recording and slides on our website with you. Thanks.
Cheers all.